in 2016, an average of 7.75 million people were counted as unemployed, and actually this is accounting for 4.9% of the total labor force. So we can see the improvement from 2010 to 2016 in terms of the unemployment rate. So however, no matter in which year, we always can find the trend that the unemployment rate actually varies significantly by race, sex, age, and education. And here we're going to learn some common sense. So which category actually have relatively higher unemployment rate? So usually the men have higher unemployment rate than women. And you kind of surprised, but at the same time you shouldn't, because as we discussed before, the unemployment rate is people unemployed divided by people who contribute to the labor force. And still in the society, we have the more bread maker are female than the males. So that's why men will have more people unemployed than a higher unemployment rate than the women. Second, the black and the Hispanics have the higher unemployment rate than the whites. So here is based on the scientific study, and so the black and the Hispanics are more likely not finding job, and if they're actively seeking job. So here, I don't know the reason behind it. It's really rely on a lot of the economic studies. So so it depends on their education background, but just coincidentally we found black and Hispanics are more like have a higher unemployment rate than the whites. And also people have less educated, get less education, have higher unemployment rate than the people who have higher education. That's why many of you are coming to college. So because for people who have less education, they are less likely to find a job if they are very actively seeking job on the job market. So the real world fact prove that. So people who the people who are less educated have a higher unemployment rate than people who are higher educated. And also the teenagers have higher unemployment rate than the people older than them. So which means the older you are, and actually the more likely you find a job if you're seeking for a job. So this kind of makes sense because people have assumption that employer have assumption that if you're older, you gain more life experience, you are more mature, and they're more likely to hire you. So this may be the reason why the teenagers will have that relatively higher employment rate than the older people. And so one thing has to keep in mind, don't feel strange why the teenager will have their own unemployment rate. Keep in mind the labor force is the people who are 16 or older. So if you're still at 16 or between 16 and 18, you are considered as teenagers. So that's why the teenagers do have their own unemployment. You can contribute to the unemployment rate. So the next we will talk about what is the duration, because later we're going to discuss why people are unemployed. So duration of the unemployment is how long does jobless last? How long does jobless last? And there is a table in textbook is 6.1, and what you can find is most people who become unemployed don't stay jobless very long. And actually only about 1 in 4 people were jobless 6 months or more in 2016. So when you're jobless, you actually can apply the governmental benefit, and so you can support your own living a little bit. So within 6 months of jobless. And so how long? So the question here now is why people got unemployed and how long a person remain unemployed is also affected by the nature of the jobless. So that's why next we're going to discuss why people lose job. So on this chart you will find we generally speaking have 4 main reasons: job loser, job leaver, new entrants, and re-entrants. So for the job leaver, so that means they quit to seek other opportunities. So many reasons can contribute that. So they may not happy about job, so they may not happy about their boss, or because they don't like the place and they quit the job and seeking to the new opportunities. So between after quitting job and before they find a job, so they actually contribute to the unemployment, but they belong to the job leaver. And second, for job losers, so they are laid off or fired. So many big corporations like GE, they lay off their workers. So if the worker got fired, and at the same time they are actively seeking job, but they haven't found it, so they also contribute to the unemployment. And then the new entrants, so the first time job seekers like you guys, if you're the first generation college student and you're like about 20, 22 when you graduate, and that your first time to find a job, so then you will and before you find a job, you actually contribute to the unemployment as well, and but you're considered as a new entrant. And then the last type is called the re-entrants. So they have left the labor force but have returned. So that's the case for many stay-home mom. So they may already work for a couple of years, and then they have a couple kids. They decide to stay at home, take care of kids. So once the kids go to college and then they want to go back to school and get education, then go back to the labor force to find a job. So in those scenario, before the lady after before the if the lady is actively seeking job and but they haven't found a job yet, they also contribute to the unemployment and they were considered as re-entrants. So you can see that the majority of the people who are contribute to unemployment is job leavers, and after that will be the re-entrant, and then will be new entrant, and the fewer people are job leavers, and a fewer portion is coming from job leavers. And since we talk about why people are losing job and why they are become unemployed, and we have to introduce a very important concept called a discouraged worker. So discouraged worker is an individual who is not actively seeking employment, but would look for or accept a job if one were available. So when the unemployment persists, job seekers become increasingly frustrated in their effort to secure employment. So this kind of discouraged worker are not counted as part of the unemployment problem because they are not considered to be out of the labor force. Remember how we define the labor force. So the people has to be actively seeking for a job. But for the discouraged worker, they actually not actively seeking for a job. So that's why for the discouraged worker, they are no longer counted in unemployment statistics. So that's something you have to keep in mind. So they actually will not consider part of the labor force. And so the next we will discuss underemployment. So first, what's the definition for the underemployment? Underemployment is people seeking full-time paid employment who work only part-time or are employed at jobs below their capacity. So if you are the part-time student, you are not considered underemployed because you need to use half of your time in school and then half time you find a part-time. However, if you graduate and you're only seeking for a part-time job, but you can work full-time, then you will define as underemployed. And some people are forced to take any job available. So like some people working in Walmart, so they are only being hired, let's say, 4 hours a day because they don't need you to work there 8 hours. So then by that chance, people have no other choices. If they don't work on in another company, they will consider it as underemployed. So for those people are excluded from the count of unemployed, but are not from the condition of the underemployment. So which means if the person is identified as underemployment, they actually will not affect the unemployment rate. So they are just, but they do contribute to the underemployment. So for underemployed workers present the labor resource that are not being fully utilized. So that's the problem. Sometimes people are arguing why the employment may not be that accurate because you can see one of the reasons here, they actually don't count the people who are only work for part-time. So they are not counting people who are working for the part-time.